No visitors, no contact. So how did she end up pregnant and solitary? Welcome to the channel where untold stories come to life. If this story has reached you, take a moment to tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know your city or country. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Because tomorrow, a brand new story is coming. One that just might stay with you long after the final word is spoken. No one ever imagined that Carla Jensen, once a respected nurse in a small Oregon town, would one day wear shackles instead of scrubs. At 35, she was soft-spoken, methodical, and known among her co-workers as the one who always stayed late to comfort patients with no visitors. But behind the calm demeanor was a woman fighting battles no one could see. Until the night everything shattered. Carla had been a single mother for nearly a decade, raising her son Eli alone after her first husband left without warning. Life wasn't easy, but it was honest. She worked nights, paid bills late, skipped meals to buy new shoes for Eli when his toes started poking out of the old ones. Still, Carla believed in second chances. She believed people could change. That belief is what led her to marry Thomas Walker, a decorated veteran who seemed kind at first, attentive, polite, and surprisingly good with kids. For the first few months, it felt like healing. Thomas brought flowers home, helped Eli with his homework, and cooked dinner every Sunday. Carla thought, maybe this was the peace she deserved. But slowly, the mask slipped. It began with subtle things, questioning where she went, who she talked to, checking her phone, setting rules about what time she should be home. Then the yelling started, the slamming doors, the control, and then the bruises. Carla endured it. Not because she was weak, but because she thought she could protect her son. She believed if she absorbed the pain, Eli could still have a safe home. But monsters don't stay behind closed doors. One evening, Eli came home from school quieter than usual. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't talk. That night he had a fever so high Carla rushed him to the ER. Tests revealed signs of trauma, the kind no child should ever endure. When questioned, Eli whispered just one thing. "Please don't make me go back home." There was no footage, no witnesses. Thomas denied everything. Authorities closed the case due to insufficient evidence. Carla died a little that day, not physically but emotionally. The system had failed her. Again. Weeks passed. She continued working, continued pretending, but something inside her shifted. On a cold January night, after Thomas came home drunk and muttered, "Your boy's just soft, he'll thank me one day," Carla walked into the kitchen. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She picked up the same surgical-grade knife she once used to save lives, and took one. When neighbors heard the noise and came running, she didn't flee. She didn't lie. She looked one officer in the eye and said, "Call it in. I killed him." The trial was quick. No private lawyer, no tears in the courtroom. Just a woman accepting the only sentence she thought was fair. Death. And so Carla Jensen, mother, nurse, protector, was placed in solitary confinement on death row, with no visitors, no letters, and no last words. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until 6 months later, when a prison medic ran out of the infirmary, pale-faced, holding a sonogram that changed everything. 6 months into her solitary sentence, Carla Jensen had become little more than a ghost behind reinforced steel and concrete. No one visited. No one called. She never asked for anything, not even a pillow. In cell D12, part of Oregon's most secure correctional wing, Carla followed every rule to the letter. She ate in silence, cleaned without being told, and stared at the same crack in the ceiling every night until sleep took her like a slow-acting sedative. The prison staff had a nickname for women like her: ghost walkers. Inmates who'd already made peace with dying. They didn't talk, didn't rebel, didn't hope. They just existed. But everything changed at 2:47 a.m. on a rainy Thursday, when the security monitor in the medical wing lit up with a red alert. Carla had collapsed in her cell, When guards arrived, they found her unconscious on the cold concrete floor, skin pale, lips blue. Her right hand was curled protectively over her stomach, a gesture that meant nothing to them at the time but would soon haunt the entire facility. She was rushed to the prison infirmary, where Dr. Elaine Brooks, the on-call physician, began running vitals, low blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, possible internal bleeding. They ran tests, drew blood, ordered an ultrasound to rule out abdominal rupture. What appeared on the screen stunned the entire medical staff. A fetus. 17 weeks. Healthy heartbeat. No complications. The room went dead silent. Dr. Brooks took a step back, staring at the screen like it had betrayed science itself. "That's not possible," she whispered. "She's in solitary." And she was, locked away 23 hours a day. Zero physical contact, every movement monitored. No male staff allowed in without dual supervision, no conjugal visits, no loopholes, and yet there it was, a child growing inside a woman sentenced to die alone. The prison erupted in panic. An internal investigation was launched within hours. Surveillance footage for the past 90 days was reviewed frame by frame. Every meal delivery, every medicine dose, every hallway movement was accounted for. No breaches, no physical contact, no male personnel unaccounted for. The cell logs were airtight. The procedures, flawless. The system was perfect, which made it all the more terrifying. How does a ghost walk into death row and walk out pregnant? One officer whispered in disbelief during the debrief. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered about artificial insemination. Others speculated it was a cover-up, a scandal. But the truth, when it finally emerged, was stranger, softer, and infinitely more human than any conspiracy theory. Carla wouldn't speak for 3 days. When she finally did, she only said this: "I didn't do it to live. I did it to leave something behind." And that was the moment the story stopped being about a crime and started becoming a miracle. The headlines never came. The media never found out. Inside those prison walls, however, Carla's pregnancy became a ghost haunting every corridor. The official investigation yielded nothing. Security footage showed no breaches, no unauthorized access, no gaps in protocol. Every officer signed off. Every keycard log matched. The system, on paper, was airtight. And yet, there she was, Carla Jensen, a woman held in complete isolation, now carrying life inside her. When questioned, she refused to name anyone. No names, no claims, just silence. But behind the silence, something had been happening for months. Something the cameras didn't catch, because it didn't take place in the open. It began through a 6-inch vent between Carla's solitary cell and the prison's adjacent maintenance shaft. That's where he worked. Jorge Alvarez, a 29-year-old inmate serving 5 years for felony assault. On paper, he was just another face. But Jorge wasn't violent by nature. He'd beaten a man nearly to death for cornering his disabled sister in a subway bathroom. There were no cameras, no witnesses, only blood, a conviction, and silence. He swept floors in the prison infirmary, quiet, hardworking, trusted enough to be left alone with boxes of discarded medical supplies, syringes, sterile gloves, leftover collection kits. One night, as he scrubbed the walls of the old medical wing, he found a crumpled paper wedged behind a pipe. It was from Carla. Written in tiny, uneven handwriting with the burnt end of a matchstick, the note read, "I don't want to live, but I want to leave something behind. I want to be a mother one last time." At first, he didn't believe it. He thought maybe it was part of some strange emotional collapse. But over the next few nights, more notes came, folded with care, passed through the same vent, the only opening that connected them across 2 concrete worlds. Jorge never asked for anything in return. He just listened. Carla, once a nurse, still remembered everything about timing, cycles, and procedure. Jorge, a former med school dropout, still remembered how to sterilize and deliver a sample safely. Together, in complete silence, through pieces of string, handwritten directions, and second-hand tools, They created a miracle the system couldn't see. No physical contact, no words spoken, just trust passed through metal grates and thin air for 7 nights straight. Carla followed the plan. Alone, under the cold lens of the surveillance camera, she performed every step with the steadiness of someone who had once brought life into the world for a living, and was now doing it one last time for herself. She never cried. Jorge never asked if it worked, but the night she didn't send another note, he knew. And when Carla collapsed in her cell 3 months later, and the ultrasound confirmed the impossible, Jorge, mopping the floors near the generator room, looked up at the ceiling, exhaled, and whispered, "She did it. Not for redemption, not for leniency, but for something no prison could ever contain. Hope." The storm rolled in fast, black clouds crawling over the hills like a warning no one could hear. Inside cell D12, Carla Jensen lay curled on her cement bed, her breathing shallow, sweat soaking through her thin, gray, prison-issued shirt. Her due date was still weeks away, but her body had other plans. At 3:06 a.m., lightning struck the far end of the prison's east perimeter, knocking out auxiliary power and scrambling the camera feeds for exactly 12 seconds. It was enough to send half the facility into protocol lockdown. But in the solitary wing, only one thing mattered. Carla was in labor. The guards didn't believe it at first. "It's probably another fainting spell," one muttered as they unlocked the first door. But by the time they reached her cell, she was on the floor, gripping her abdomen, blood pooling beneath her. Within minutes, the emergency med team had her on a gurney, wheeling her into the old infirmary, the same room where Jorge used to mop floors, where this improbable miracle had first begun. There was no time to transfer her to a hospital. Roads were flooded, phones were down. The nearest OB/GYN was hours away. They had one nurse, a young army medic, and a drawer full of expired supplies. Carla didn't scream, didn't beg. She just clutched the edge of the gurney and stared at the ceiling like she was memorizing the last thing she'd ever see. Her blood pressure was dropping. Contractions were erratic. The fetus was in breech position. The staff had two choices: do nothing and let nature take its course, or try something they hadn't done in decades. A manual birth in an under-equipped prison room, guided only by instinct and grit. "Let's get this baby out," the medic said, tying his sleeves with trembling hands. The storm outside roared like the world itself was holding its breath. Carla bit down on a towel to muffle the pain, her body arching as another contraction hit like a wave of fire. The nurse dabbed her forehead with a rag. "You're not alone," she whispered. "You hear me? You're not alone." At 4:13 a.m., a sound pierced the thunder, a cry, small, fragile, but alive. The room froze. Even the medic stopped moving. Carla exhaled slowly, her body trembling, her face pale, but her eyes lit up like someone who had seen the sunrise after years of darkness. It was a baby girl, 5 pounds, 2 ounces, tiny fingers, wrinkled skin, 2 eyes blinking into a world that didn't expect her, didn't plan for her, but now had to make space for her. Carla didn't say much. She simply held her daughter close, kissed the crown of her head, and whispered the name she had chosen months ago, back when this was only a hope scribbled on stolen paper. "Her name is Grace." And that night, in a room meant for endings, something new had begun. The morning after Grace was born, the prison felt different. There was no announcement, no ceremony, just a soft, undeniable shift in the air. The guards spoke in quieter tones. The nurses lingered a little longer. Even the warden, a man known for treating emotion like a liability, stood at the infirmary door for several minutes without saying a word. Inside, Carla Jensen sat propped up on the narrow hospital bed, holding her daughter as though she were made of light. For the first time in years, Carla wasn't thinking about death. She wasn't counting days. She was counting breaths, each one rising and falling against her chest as Grace slept peacefully in her arms. The next afternoon, Warden Mitchell met with Carla privately. He laid a printed copy of federal regulation, TDU 14 on the metal table between them. The clause was simple. No woman on death row may be executed while caring for a child under the age of 36 months. He spoke softly, like he wasn't sure if he should be angry, impressed, or afraid. You have a choice, he said. File for clemency. You've got public sympathy, medical proof. There's a path forward, maybe not freedom, but time. Carla looked down at her daughter, then back at the warden. I'm not asking for time, she said. I'm asking for 6 months. He frowned. 6 months? That's how long I can breastfeed, she said quietly. That's all I want. To give her a strong start. Then someone else can do the rest. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't defiance. It was finality. The kind that comes from someone who had already made peace with her fate, but not with leaving nothing behind. Over the weeks that followed, Carla's cell was moved closer to the infirmary. The staff referred to it unofficially as the nursery wing. No one else was allowed inside. No reporters, no visitors, just Carla and Grace, waking, feeding, sleeping, living. Every night after Grace drifted off, Carla wrote a few lines. In a plain spiral notebook. Notes about what Grace liked, how she smiled with only one cheek dimple, the sound she made when she tried to sneeze but failed. The notebook wasn't a diary. It was a blueprint for love, written in case she never got to say these things out loud. On day 183, the foster care van arrived. Carla dressed Grace in the softest onesie she had, wrapped her in the hospital blanket she'd saved since birth, and kissed her forehead one last time. No tears, no goodbyes, just a whisper. You were never a mistake. You were a choice. 6 days later, Carla was escorted down the long, fluorescent-lit hallway toward the execution chamber. She didn't resist. She didn't tremble. The only thing she carried was a folded page from her notebook, placed gently into the hands of the nurse who once held Grace first. It read, "She's the reason I wasn't afraid to die." And with that, Carla Jensen left the world, not as a number on death row, but as a mother who refused to leave without giving life one final victory. If this story moved you, even for just a moment, I invite you to pause and reflect. Carla Jensen wasn't a saint. She wasn't perfect. But she was a mother. A woman who chose to create life in the very place where life is meant to end. What would you have done in her place? Do you believe what she did was wrong? Or was it her final act of courage? We want to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and more importantly, tell us what part of this story stayed with you. Was it the silent exchange of hope through a prison vent? The miracle birth during a storm? Or the way a woman on death row asked not to live, but simply to nurture? Your voice matters. These stories are more than content. They're mirrors of what we believe, fear, and hope for. So share your perspective, respectfully and openly. And don't forget to subscribe. We share powerful, real-life inspired stories like this every week. Let's keep the conversation going, because sometimes one comment can bring as much light as a story itself.